My twin sister graduated with honors using my application essays, lived in my childhood bedroom while I slept in a garage, and built her entire college life on opportunities that had my name on them. And when she finally collapsed on stage in front of everyone, drowning in anxiety she couldn't escape, she asked one question that shattered everything. Who has been saving me all these years? I raised my hand, not to humiliate her, but to finally exist. My name is Lydia Monroe. I'm 26 years old and I'm the second twin. 2 minutes younger according to the doctors, but 12 years behind in space, love, and recognition when it comes to my family. If you ask anyone in our hometown of Eugene, Oregon, they'll tell you my sister Camille was always the bright one, the charming one, the one who mattered. And me? I was the shadow, the echo, the backup copy nobody asked for. But before I tell you how I went from invisible to irreplaceable, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like you were living proof that love can be conditional? That no matter what you did, someone else would always be chosen first? If you've ever been the forgotten child, the overlooked sibling, the one who had to fight for crumbs of attention, leave a like right now, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe. Because this story, you'll never forget how it ends. Everything started the day we were born, or maybe 2 minutes after I was born. That's how long Camille arrived before me. 2 minutes, 120 seconds that somehow became the measure of everything that followed. We grew up in Eugene, Oregon, in a small house with yellow siding and a maple tree in the front yard. Our mother, Elise, was a nurse who worked double shifts to keep us fed after our father, Anthony, died when we were 9. I remember the funeral. I remember Camille crying loudly, dramatically, and everyone rushing to comfort her. I cried too, quietly, in the bathroom. Nobody noticed. Mom used to say she loved us both equally, but love isn't what you say, it's what you do. And what she did was turn toward Camille every single time. When Camille walked into a room, the air changed. Her voice was louder, her laugh easier, her presence impossible to ignore. I was the one who studied in silence while she collected attention like currency. Our bedrooms told the whole story. When we turned 11, Mom repainted Camille's room in soft lavender with white furniture and fairy lights strung across the ceiling. Mine stayed the same pale beige it had always been. "You don't care about that stuff, Lydia," Mom said, smiling like it was a compliment. "You're more practical." Practical. That was the word she used when she meant less important. Birthdays were the worst. We shared the same birthday, obviously, but the celebrations never felt shared. When we turned 13, Camille got a new laptop for her creative projects. I got a used graphing calculator. "You're so good with numbers," Mom said, as if that made it fair. When we turned 16, Camille got driving lessons and a photo session at the mall. I got a gift card to a bookstore and a hug. I smiled and said thank you because that's what I always did. School was where the pattern became undeniable. Camille was popular, charming, surrounded by friends who adored her. Her grades were mediocre, but teachers loved her anyway because she knew how to make them laugh. I had straight A's, perfect attendance, and a resume full of volunteer work. But when parents' night came around, I'd hear Mom bragging to other parents about Camille's social skills, her confidence, her bright future. My achievements were mentioned in passing. "Oh, Lydia, she's fine. Very responsible." Responsible, practical, fine. Those were the words that defined me. Never brilliant, never special, just there. By the time we were 18, I had built my entire identity around one goal: getting into the University of Washington to study architecture. It wasn't just a dream, it was survival. I spent 3 years building a portfolio, volunteering at local design firms, writing and rewriting application essays until my fingers cramped. I wanted to design spaces where people felt like they belonged, spaces where nobody was forgotten. Camille? She coasted. She talked about going to college the way people talk about vacation, something nice that would happen eventually. She didn't have a portfolio. She barely had a plan. But she had something I never could compete with. She had Mom's unconditional belief that she deserved everything. The acceptance letter arrived on a rainy March morning. I opened it with shaking hands, read the words, "We are pleased to inform you." and felt my entire body flood with relief. I had done it. I had earned something that was mine. I ran downstairs to tell Mom, the letter clutched in my hand like proof of my existence. She was on the phone, with the university's admissions office, and she was saying Camille's name. That's when everything I thought I knew shattered into pieces I'd spent years trying to put back together. I stood there in the kitchen doorway, frozen, listening to my mother's voice on the phone. She was asking about enrollment procedures, confirming housing options, giving them Camille's information, my information, but with her name attached to it. When she hung up, I asked the only question I could force through my throat. Mom, what are you doing? She looked at me with that patient smile she used when she thought I was being dramatic. Helping your sister, honey. The admissions office called about some paperwork confusion with her application. Apparently, there was a mix-up with the essays. A mix-up? My voice cracked. Those were my essays, my portfolio, my application. Lydia, don't be ridiculous. She turned back to her coffee like the conversation was already over. Camille applied too. You both did. And she got in. You should be happy for her. I got in. That letter was addressed to me. The system makes mistakes sometimes. They must have sent it to the wrong twin. She said it so casually, like it was a postal error, like my entire future was just a clerical issue. Besides, Camille needs this more than you do. She struggled so much with finding her path. You're smart, Lydia. You'll figure something else out. I wanted to scream. I wanted to show her the emails, the confirmation codes, the months of correspondence that had my name, my student ID, my application number. But she wasn't looking at me anymore. She was already texting Camille the good news. That's when Camille walked in, phone in hand, smiling like she'd just won a prize she'd worked years to earn. She hugged Mom. They jumped up and down together, and I stood there holding a letter that had my name on it, feeling like I was disappearing in real time. Lydia, aren't you excited? Camille turned to me, her eyes bright with something I couldn't name. Pride? Relief? Or maybe just the comfort of knowing she'd won again without even trying. Those were my essays, I said quietly. You used my work. Her smile didn't even flicker. We're twins. We think alike. I'm sure we just had similar ideas. Camille, you didn't even write an essay. I saw your drafts. They were 3 sentences long. She shrugged, unbothered. Well, the university obviously liked what I submitted. Mom's hand landed on my shoulder, gentle but firm. Lydia, this is your sister's moment. Don't ruin it with jealousy. It's not a good look on you. Jealousy. That's what she called it. Not theft, not betrayal, jealousy. The next week, everything accelerated. Camille needed to prepare for freshman orientation. She needed new clothes, a new laptop, dorm supplies, and she needed space. My room, specifically. It was bigger, brighter, closer to the bathroom. Just until she leaves for school, Mom said. It makes more sense for her to have the bigger room right now. You understand, don't you? I moved my things into the basement, a windowless room that smelled like mildew and old cardboard. I hung my posters on cinder block walls and tried to tell myself it was temporary, that I'd find another way, that this wasn't the end of everything. But it was. Because a week later, I came home to find Camille wearing my clothes, the nice blouse I'd saved for interviews, the necklace my dad gave me before he died. She was sitting in my old room, on my old bed, surrounded by boxes labeled with my dreams, and she looked at me like I was a guest in my own life. Do you mind if I borrow this? She asked, touching the necklace. It looks so good with this outfit. I minded. I minded so much that my hands shook, but I didn't say anything. Because what was the point? I had already been erased. That night, I lay on a sagging mattress in the basement and made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one. I didn't slam doors or write angry letters. I just decided, quietly and completely, that I was done. Done begging for space in a house that had already decided I didn't need one. Done asking to be seen by people who had spent 18 years looking past me. Done waiting for fairness in a family that had never believed in it. I packed a single suitcase. I left a note on the kitchen counter that said, I'm going to Portland. I'll call when I'm settled. And at 5 in the morning, while everyone was still asleep, I walked out the front door and didn't look back. Nobody called to stop me. Nobody even noticed I was gone until dinner time. Portland welcomed me with rain and indifference. I found a receptionist job at a small dental office that paid $9 an hour and rented a converted garage behind a house in southeast Portland for $350 a month. It had one window, a hot plate, and a bathroom I shared with the landlord's teenage son. It smelled like motor oil and old wood, and it was the first place that ever felt like mine. The first month was the hardest. Not because of the work or the money, though both were brutal. It was the silence, the realization that I had left, and nobody had fought for me to stay. Mom called once, 3 weeks after I moved. Not to ask how I was, not to apologize. To tell me that Camille had started her freshman year and was struggling with homesickness. It would mean a lot if you called her, Mom said. You know how sensitive she is. I hung up without promising anything. Work became my entire world. I woke up at 6, took 2 buses to the office, answered phones and filed insurance claims until 5, then picked up shifts cleaning offices downtown until midnight. On weekends, I worked catering gigs, standing for 10 hours in black pants and white shirts, serving rich people at weddings while pretending my feet weren't bleeding. I didn't eat much. Ramen, mostly. Sometimes peanut butter straight from the jar. I lost weight I didn't have to lose, and my reflection started looking like someone I didn't recognize. Thin. Tired. Angry in a way that lived under my skin like a second skeleton. But I didn't break. Not completely. Because one night, coming home soaked from a storm that had turned the streets into rivers, I found a flyer taped to a telephone pole near my bus stop. It was wrinkled and half torn, but the words were clear. Independent scholarship program for students who lost educational opportunities due to family hardship. I pulled it down and read it under a streetlight. It wasn't a miracle. It didn't promise full rides or instant acceptance. It promised time, low-interest loans, psychological support, and a chance to rebuild what had been taken. I applied that night on a library computer, my hands shaking so hard I had to retype my name 3 times. 3 months later, I got the call. I'd been accepted into a pilot program for adult learners pursuing degrees in design and urban planning. It wouldn't be easy. It would take years. I'd have to work full-time while studying part-time, attend classes at night, and survive on 4 hours of sleep. But it was mine. A path forward that nobody had stolen. I said yes before they even finished explaining the terms. The next 3 years were a blur of exhaustion and determination. I studied on buses, during lunch breaks, in the early hours before dawn when the city was still dark. I took classes on architectural theory, urban design, community planning. I fell asleep on textbooks, woke up with ink smudged on my cheeks, and kept going because stopping felt like dying. Professor Neil Harden changed everything. He was an older man, a widower, a retired architect who taught one-night class a week because he said he got bored staying home. He saw something in me that I'd stopped believing existed. He called it discipline. I called it desperation. Either way, he took me under his wing. You don't design buildings, Lydia, he told me one evening after class. You design belonging. That's rarer than you think. He became a mentor, a father figure, the first person in years who looked at me and saw someone worth investing in. He gave me books, introduced me to people in the industry, wrote recommendation letters that opened doors I didn't know existed. He never asked why I was alone. He just made sure I didn't stay that way. Mom called twice more during those years. Once to tell me Camille made Dean's List. Once to ask if I could lend her money because Camille's tuition payment was late. I said no to the money. I didn't explain why. She didn't ask. By the time I turned 21, I had finished my degree in urban design with honors. I'd been hired by a small firm that specialized in community spaces, affordable housing, and public parks. My work wasn't glamorous, but it was real. And for the first time in my life, I had something nobody could take from me. That's when I started the Horizon Fund, a private, silent scholarship network that paid tuition for students who'd lost opportunities because of family dysfunction. I didn't advertise it. I didn't attach my name to it. I just quietly found people who were living my story and gave them what I'd never had, a second chance. The first person I funded was someone I'd never met, someone who reminded me of myself, someone who deserved better. The second person was my sister. I found out Camille was struggling by accident. A mutual acquaintance from high school mentioned it casually at a coffee shop in Portland. "Your sister's having a rough time, huh? Heard your mom lost her job. Must be tough paying for school." I didn't respond. I just nodded and changed the subject. But that night, I looked up the University of Washington's tuition rates, calculated what she'd need per semester, and opened a new account under the Horizon Fund. Anonymous donor, clean electronic transfers, no names, no messages. Just money arriving exactly when it was needed. I paid for 2 semesters before Mom's employment stabilized. Then I kept paying. Because by then, I'd learned through carefully worded questions to old classmates that Camille was drowning. Her grades were slipping. She'd missed enough classes that academic probation was looming. She was posting perfect pictures on Instagram, bright smiles and confident captions, but anyone who looked closely could see the cracks, the forced brightness, the desperate need for validation in every comment section. So I kept her afloat. Not because I loved her, not because I forgave her, but because watching someone drown, even someone who stole your life, is a different kind of pain. And maybe, in some twisted way, I needed to prove that I could be better than the people who raised us. I negotiated with the university's financial aid office when her payments were late. I anonymously covered the cost of her final semester when she nearly dropped out due to stress. I made sure she had what she needed to finish what she'd started with my name on it. She never knew. Nobody did. The money came through an encrypted donor system that protected my identity completely. To her, it was just luck. To me, it was the quietest, strangest form of justice I could imagine. Meanwhile, my own life was finally taking shape. I signed my first major contract at 24, designing a community center in a neglected neighborhood in North Portland. The kind of project that didn't make headlines but changed lives. A safe space for kids who needed somewhere to go after school. A place where people felt seen. My firm grew. My reputation grew. I started getting calls from cities across the Pacific Northwest asking me to consult on affordable housing projects, public parks, urban renewal initiatives that prioritized people over profit. I wasn't famous, but I was respected. And respect, I learned, feels better than attention ever did. Professor Hardin attended every ribbon cutting, every project launch. He'd stand in the back with his arms crossed, nodding slightly, and afterward he'd say, "You're doing it, kid. You're building the world you needed when you were young." And that's when I'd have to look away so he wouldn't see me cry. Mom called when I was 25. Her voice was different, softer, older. "Lydia, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know I haven't been. I know I made mistakes. I'd like to see you. Talk. If you're willing." I wasn't. Not yet. But I said maybe, because anger is exhausting and I was tired of carrying it everywhere. Camille, meanwhile, was preparing for her senior showcase, the final presentation that would determine whether she graduated with honors, whether firms would recruit her, whether all those years of borrowed dreams would pay off. I heard about it through social media. She posted constantly, rehearsal photos, late-night study sessions, captions about how hard she was working, how stressed she was, how much this mattered. I didn't comment. I didn't like the posts. I just watched from a distance the way you watch a storm forming on the horizon, knowing eventually it will reach you. The invitation arrived in my mailbox 3 weeks before the event. Formal, printed on thick cardstock. "You are cordially invited to the University of Washington School of Architecture Senior Showcase." Camille's name was listed among the presenters. My name was nowhere. I held that invitation for a long time, turning it over in my hands, feeling the weight of it. I could throw it away. Pretend I never got it. Stay in my new life where nobody knew me as the other twin, the forgotten one, the girl who didn't matter. But something in me, something stubborn and unbreakable, decided differently. I was going. Not to confront her, not to ruin her moment, but to finally, after 8 years of silence and distance, take up space in a room where my absence had never been noticed. I bought a plane ticket. I picked out clothes that made me feel strong. And I prepared myself for the moment when the girl who stole my life would finally see the woman I'd become without her. The auditorium at the University of Washington was packed. Students, professors, families, potential employers. Everyone dressed in business casual, holding programs, whispering excitedly about the presentations. I sat in the back row, alone, my hands folded in my lap like I was holding myself together. Mom was in the third row. I recognized the back of her head, the way she leaned toward the woman next to her, probably bragging about Camille. She hadn't seen me come in. I'd made sure of that. The lights dimmed. The presentations began. One by one, seniors walked onto the stage, displayed their architectural models, explained their visions for urban spaces, affordable housing, sustainable design. They were good. Some were great. But I wasn't there for them. Then it was Camille's turn. She walked onto the stage in a navy dress, her hair pulled back, her face composed in that practiced smile I recognized from 1,000 childhood photos. She looked successful, put together, exactly like someone who'd earned every opportunity life had given her. She began her presentation. Her project was a community wellness center, a building designed to provide mental health resources in underserved neighborhoods. The irony wasn't lost on me. She spoke about accessibility, about creating spaces where people felt safe, where help was available to everyone regardless of income or status. The words were right, the design was solid, but something in her voice was wrong. It wavered. She stumbled over a sentence, corrected herself, stumbled again. Her hands, holding the remote for her slides, started shaking. The room noticed. Whispers rippled through the audience. Camille stopped mid-sentence, staring at the screen like she'd forgotten what came next. Her breathing quickened. Her face went pale. She gripped the podium, and I saw it happen in real time. The mask cracking, the performance collapsing. She tried to continue. This project, I wanted to create. I needed to. Her voice broke. Her knees buckled. She caught herself on the edge of the podium, but barely. Someone in the front row stood up, concerned, but she held up a hand. I'm fine. I need a moment. But she wasn't fine. She was falling apart in front of 200 people, and nobody knew how to stop it. I should have been better, she whispered into the microphone, her voice so raw it hurt to hear. Someone kept saving me. Every time I was about to fail, someone fixed it. And I never asked who. I just took it. I took everything. Because that's what I always did. The room went silent, uncomfortably, brutally silent. She looked out into the audience, tears streaming down her face now, mascara smudging, all the polish gone. Who was it? Who's been paying for my life when I couldn't? Who kept me from drowning? Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. I stood up. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't shout or make a scene. I just stood, slowly, in the back row, and raised my hand like I was answering a question in class. Camille's eyes found mine across the distance. Recognition hit her like a physical blow. Lydia? Her voice cracked on my name. You. It was you? I nodded. Once. That's all it took. She collapsed. Not physically. Though she sank into the chair, someone rushed onto the stage. But emotionally, completely, she fell apart in a way that was painful to watch. Security helped her off stage. The program continued with awkward energy, and I sat back down, my heart pounding, feeling like I'd just set fire to 8 years of silence. After the ceremony, I found her in a side hallway, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, her dress wrinkled, her face blotchy from crying. Mom was there too, hovering, helpless. They both looked up when I approached. Why? Camille's voice was hoarse. Why would you do that, after everything I took from you? I crouched down so we were at eye level. Because watching you drown wasn't the revenge I thought it would be. And because maybe I needed to prove to myself that I could be better than the people who raised us. Mom flinched at that. Good. I'm sorry, Camille whispered. I'm so sorry, Lydia. I knew. Deep down, I always knew I didn't deserve what I had. But I took it anyway, because it was easier than admitting I wasn't enough on my own. You're not half of me, I said quietly. And I'm not half of you. We're two separate people who got tangled up in other people's choices. You don't have to be me to matter. You just have to be you. She cried harder. I didn't hug her, not yet, but I didn't walk away either. Mom tried to apologize. She said she'd made mistakes, that she'd been blind, that she was sorry. I told her I'd think about it, that forgiveness wasn't something I could give in a hallway, that some wounds take years to heal, if they heal at all. 6 months later, Camille transferred to a community college counseling program. She's studying to become a therapist now, working with students who struggle with perfectionism and anxiety. She's not brilliant at it yet, but she's real, and that's more than she ever was before. I signed my first major contract as lead architect on a public housing development in Seattle. 200 units designed for low-income families with community spaces built into every floor. Spaces where people belong. Professor Harden attended the groundbreaking. "You did it," he said, his eyes wet. "You built a home for people who never had one." I smiled. I learned from the best. Mom and I talk now, not often, not easily, but we're trying. She asked me once why I helped Camille after everything. I told her the truth, because being whole doesn't mean making someone else broken. It just means choosing yourself without destroying everyone else in the process. And Camille? We're not close. Maybe we never will be. But we're not enemies either. We're just two women who were born at the same time and spent 26 years learning that being identical doesn't mean being the same. I'm 26 now. I have my own apartment with huge windows that let in light. I have work that matters. I have people who see me, really see me, not as someone's shadow, but as my own solid self. And when I look in the mirror, I finally see what I spent my whole life searching for. Not the girl who was forgotten, but the woman who built herself from scratch and refused to disappear. This story, while dramatized, is inspired by the real experiences of countless individuals who have lived in the shadow of a sibling, constantly compared and chronically overlooked. Being genetically identical yet emotionally discarded teaches you something profound. Your worth was never determined by who saw you, but by who you chose to become when no one was looking. These aren't just stories. They are lessons in self-worth, resilience, and the courage to choose yourself when no one else does. Before you go, I want to ask you, have you ever been constantly compared to a sibling or someone close to you? How did it shape who you are today? And for those who felt invisible in their own families, what was the moment you finally decided to see yourself? Do you believe it's possible to forgive people who made you feel like you weren't enough, or is moving forward without them sometimes the healthier choice? If this story resonated with you, if you felt the pain, the struggle, and ultimately the liberation, write the word whole in the comments so I know you stayed until the end. And tell me, what city are you watching from? I'd love to know where this message is reaching. If you found value in this story, hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might change how you see yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's still fighting to be seen. And don't forget to click on the next video in the cards above, because every story here carries a message worth hearing. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you were never half of anyone. You were always whole.